See my slide, type on the comment section.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, bro. Can barely hear you here.
Can you hear me now?
Or I can barely hear you. Please just hold on.
Please let the meeting be recorded. The last one
Hold on.
we had yesterday, we didn't see the recorded version.
Okay, so good day all. Can you hear me loud and clear? Please, if you can hear me, type on the comment section that you can hear me. So today we are going to be looking at uh, mode 5, and mode 5 talks about resource requirement. So we're going to be looking at resource requirements. We have looked at general requirements. We have looked at structure and governance requirements. So today we're going to be looking at resource requirement. Resource requirement. Okay. So for that, basically, now 6.1 talks about general. 6.2 talks about personnel. And 6.3 and 6.3 talks about facility and environmental. 6.4 addresses equipment. And 6.5 addresses equipment calibration, methodological traceability. While 6.6 talks about reagent and consumables. Then uh 6.7 talks about service agreement. Then 6.8 talks about external provided product and services. Then that is it for the for the resource requirement that we're going to be looking at today. So we start by way of introduction. My name is Dr. Aliu, and I'll be taking you on this ISO15189 resource requirement for this program. So quickly, let's look back generally. So when we talk about resource requirement, generally the laboratory shall have available personnel, facility, equipment, reagent, consumables, and support services necessary to manage and perform its activity. So this resource requirement is addressing personnel, addressing facility, addressing equipment, addressing reagents, and addressing what support services. So these are the key sub requirements under the what resource requirement. Personnel. We know that personnel is one of the most important resources. We talk about facility, talking about equipment, reagents, consumables, and other support services that is needed to be able to manage uh, the requirements. So for 6.2 talks about personnel. The laboratory shall have access to sufficient numbers of competent personnel. Now, be competent and work is in accordance to the laboratory management system. So it is important of meeting the need and the requirement for the user and this document. Now, have a program to introduce personnel to the organization. So in other words, one of the requirements states that you must have sufficient numbers of competent personnel, competent in terms of qualification. So the right set of people should be in the right set of job descriptions and also in the right department. Now, it is important that once they come in, now the competency should be described in your job description in accordance to the laboratory management system, which you are going to see in the ISO 15189 2022 document. Now, it is important that once this personnel comes in, they are to undergo what is known as introduction, orientation to the organization. So the department area, the place of work, terms of condition, the healthcare facilities, access to facilities, leaves, everything you have to ensure that the personnel undergo orientation. So in this orientation, it's important that you have an orientation manual. You can also have orientation checklist or something like orientation form, whereby every personnel that comes into that organization pass through that orientation, and there is a documentation showing that this personnel has gone through what this orientation. Are we communicating? Now, the competency requirements for the personnel. Laboratory shall specify the competency requirement for each function, so including requirements for education, qualification, training, retraining, technical knowledge, and skills and experience. So each role, each job description, each role should have what a competency requirement that shows what is the educational qualification. For a phlebotomy, for a pre-analytical, what is the educational qualification? What is the training that is expected? What are the training that should be done? What is the technical knowledge? What is the skill? What is the experience you are looking for? That has to be documented in the with the human resource or within the lab director. Now, the laboratory shall ensure all personnel have competence. So everyone must have a competency in his or what assignment or his or her job description. The laboratory shall have process for managing competency of its personnel. So there must be a policy and a documented procedure for managing competency of personnel. And one of the way you do that is by having a competency record. So every personnel must have a competency record. That competency record shows you what and what procedures, processes, and systems that you are competent in. So you, in a good characteristic of a competency record, should have, depending on the way you design it, but design in such a way that it has a tax, it has the person who is training and the trainee and signatures and attestation that such person has undergone such training. So there must be a documented procedure. If a personnel is carrying out a procedure or a test without a competency record to show that he or she is competent, it's a non-conformance. And so part of the competency requirement is you having a competency assessment and competency records. Now, example of competency assessment method can be used in any combination. You could use direct observation on activity, monitoring and recording and reporting of the examination, review of the work record the person has done, assessment of problem solving skill, examination, especially provided service, previously exam samples, interlaboratory comparison materials, split samples, and etc. So you could use one, two, or three, or both combinations of all these ways of assessing a personnel. Then you have to deem the personnel competent before that personnel is authorized to run any test or run any procedures, including phlebotomy. So they must have ensured that the personnel has the competency. He has been trained and has been deemed competent by a trainer before he or she is allowed to carry what such that. Next is it is important for us to know that there must be an authorization. I spoke this in my previous section. When we talk about authorization, that's 6.2.3, shall authorize personnel to perform specific laboratory activities. Example, selection, development, modification, validation, and verification of method. Now, this authorization, you have to review it, release, and reporting of results. There must be different levels of authorization. Use of laboratory information system like the LIS, in particular, assessing some patient data. Not everybody should have the authorization to change patient data or change patient results or change patient information. So there must be a level of authorization. And all the levels of authorization, whether validation of results, whether of reporting of results, release of results, assessment of patient data, must be well documented, and they must have procedure for that. 6.24 talks about part of the personnel management is continuous education and professional development. So the personnel shall participate in continuous education and regular professional development. It's expected that what every personnel has is involved in professional development and continuous what education. 6.25 talks about personnel record. So personnel record look at determining the competency requirement as specified in 6.22. That is our previous. So some of the things that should be, all the content in personnel record should be there. The position description, that job description, training and retraining, authorization of personnel, monitoring on the competency assessment, etc., certificates, everything that is there in ISO 15189 2012 as regards personnel record should be there. Are we communicating? So your files should be up to date for each personnel, including your vaccine record, your educational qualification, your license, your job description, your training records, the competency records, and etc. must be present in every personnel's work file. Now, 6.3 talks about what facility and environmental conditions. So we have looked at personnel as part of the resources. Now we're looking at facility and environmental condition as part of what the resources, because it is expedient that the environment and the facility must be able to accommodate the kind of services that is being rendered to the patient or to the client or to the end user. So suitable for the laboratory activities and shall not adversely affect the validity of results. So the environment condition and the facility must not adversely affect the validity of the result or the safety of the patient, the visitor, the laboratory user, or the personnel. So the lab should be operated in an environmental condition or in a facility whereby the process is not be affected by the environment, to not affect the validity of the result, the safety of the patient, the visitors, laboratory users, and the personnel. The requirement for facility and environmental conditions necessary for performance of the laboratory activity shall be specified, monitored, what, and recorded. Now, ISO 15189, ISO 15190 provide details for facility and environmental what condition. Now, environmental condition can adversely affect the validity of a result, but are not limited uh, to some of all these things. Now, it is expected that the environment should be controlled. The environment should be in an appropriate manner that will not affect the quality of the result. Let's say, for example, now when the temperature of the lab is not in an ideal temperature within the room temperature, that can affect some tests or some equipment. Now, when the environment at which you are storing those reagents and consumables, which you are going to see, are not in the appropriate temperature, are not in the appropriate storage condition, it can also affect what the result. So these are things that we must put in place for we to have the desired result. Now, facility control, talk about 6.32. Facility control shall be implemented, recorded, monitored, and reviewed periodically. So every of your facilities should have a control access. Prevention, you have to prevent contamination, interference, and adverse influence. So access, control access is key. So every lab should have a control access. Everybody cannot just badge in. Provision of safety facility and devices where applicable and regularly verify their function. Things like um, fire fire alarm system, the fire system, smoke detectors, everything, first aid, all those things, they are part of what safety, eye wash stations, etc. So these things must be in place and they must be checked periodically to see if they are functioning. Because of what use is you having a fire safety device that is not actually working? For example, could be the operation of emergency release, intercom, alarm system for cold rooms, walk-in freezers, stability of emergency showers, eye wash station, and resuscitation equipment. All these and more are part of what safety facility and devices. Maintenance of the laboratory facilities in a functional and reliable what condition. There are some labs that are in a dilapidated state, in a state whereby if a patient is to see the way the lab is, definitely they won't want to do business with you. They won't want to give you your samples, their samples for result to come. So we must put the environment in such a way that it supports the validity of the result, support the patient, support the personnel, and etc. Now, 6.33 talks about storage facility. So for storage facility, we have what we call storage space for samples, equipment, reagent, consumables. They must be documented and recorded. So the space for storing a sample should not be the same space for storing what a reagent. If you have a fridge, for example, fridge, please don't combine your sample fridge with your reagent fridge. This can cause what? Contamination. Patient sample and material used in the examination process shall be stored in a manner that prevents what? Cross contamination and deterioration. So if the temperature is not ideal, there are some persons in some rural areas where they operate the lab like a barber shop. So like a local barber shop. So in other words, when there is no light, there is no alternative powers sources, and so the reagent can be kept in the fridge and the reagent can get deteriorated. So you have to control it. You have to ensure that these things are being stored in a way that it will prevent contamination and also what deterioration. Number C talks about storage and disposal facility of hazardous material and biological waste shall be appropriate to the classification of the materials in the context of any statutory or regulatory requirement. So you must have your appropriate what storage and disposal facility of hazardous materials and biological waste. This has to do with waste management. In basic quality management system, we talked about waste management. So all your waste segregation has to be done. Then you should be able to have policies that address your waste management. You should also have SOPs for disposals of waste, etc. You to have sign and service level agreement with those organizations that in charge of taking up those waste from your facility. These are very, very important when it comes to what disposal of hazardous materials, including biological waste, sharp needles, and etc. They must be disposed in such a way that it will not cause harm to both the environment and also. And all this thing has to have a documented process. You also have documented, and you also need to train personnel on this aspect of waste management. This is very, very key and essential. 6.34 talks about personnel facilities. There shall be adequate access to toilet facilities and a supply to drinking water, as well as facilities for storage of personnel protective equipment and clothing. So you should have places where these personnel should be able to stay, like the call room, the staff room, where they have access to drinking water, where they also have good storage for their personal clothing and also for their PPEs. Now, space for personal activities such as meeting, quiet studies, rest areas should also be provided. Gone like those days where the lab is kept maybe in a small cubicle or in a kitchen and say, okay, you guys should just manage. No, that is where we should design it in such a way that personnel should have space for meeting, their meeting rooms, rest areas, access to toilets, access to drinking waters, access to place to store their PPEs and other clothing. Are we communicating? So please, if you can hear me, type on the comment section that you can hear me loud and clear. Please, if you can hear me, type on the comment section that you can hear me. Okay. Okay. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Please, if you have a question, you can type it or you wait till at the end of the class to ask your question. You can type it or I'll wait at the end. I will address it. Okay. Now, 6.3.5 talks about sample collection facility. So, sample collection facility shall enable collection to be undertaken in a manner that does not invalidate the result or have adverse effect on the quality of what testing. So you must be able to have a facility that has good lighting for sample collection. Consider privacy, comfort, and need. Let's say, for example, like disabled access, where you could roll a wheelchair, toilet facilities, patient and accommodation, and those accompany patient to the lab. Guardians, interpreters during collection. You should be able to have space that accommodates what such. Provide separate patient reception and collection area. So your reception area should be different from what a sample collection area. Maintain first aid materials for both patient and what personnel. Now, ISO 20658 provide details for sample collection what facility. So in other words, your facility, your sample collection facility must be designed in such a way that it supports good collection procedures. It also supports the validity of the results and does not have a way to compromise the quality of the analytical or quality of the examination method. So 6.4 talks about the equipment. So we looked at facility and environmental condition. We look at personnel. Now we are looking at what equipment. 6.4 talks about equipment. So now In the basic quality management system, we talked about process of selection, procurement, installation, acceptance testing, including acceptability criteria, handling, transport, storage, use, maintenance, and decommissioning of equipment. All these things fall under what is known as equipment management, the commissioning, etc. So if you need to go through those things, go through those equipment management. So in order to ensure proper functioning and to prevent contamination or deterioration. So the laboratory equipment include hardware and software of instruments, measuring system, laboratory information system, or any equipment that influences the result of the laboratory activities, including sample transportation system. They are all known as for equipment. So equipment goes beyond your analyzers. Your analyzer is part of the equipment, but here when we're talking about the equipment, we're talking about both software, hardware of instruments, your measuring systems, your laboratory information system, LIS, or any equipment that can influence the result of the laboratory activities, including what sample transportation system, your bikes, for Korea, if you have a Korea system, all these falls under what? Equipment. Okay, 6.4.2 talks about equipment requirements. So what is the requirement? One of the requirements is that you must have a policy for your equipment management. Equipment required for the correct performance of the laboratory. So all the equipment that is necessary, both big equipment and small equipment, you must have them working perfectly. Now, each item of the equipment that can influence laboratory activity shall be uniquely labeled, marked, or otherwise identified, and a register is maintained. In other words, in your facility, you have a document. When you pull it out, you say, this is what your equipment register. This is what your equipment. Now, that's why I say go back to the basic quality management system. You will see all the aspects of what the equipment management, including the commissioning, selection, validations, etc. You hear things about what should be done when an equipment is not in use. It should be properly labeled, not in use, how equipment transferred, validation of the equipment, etc. and etc. The laboratory shall maintain and replace equipment as needed to ensure the quality of what examination results. Each item of the equipment that can influence the laboratory activity shall be uniquely labeled, marked, or otherwise identified as in a registered method. So each lab should have the list of their equipment, including so timers and the names. You should have them, or they are part of what? Your equipment. 6.4.3 talks about equipment acceptance procedures. So before an equipment is used, you have to verify that equipment to ensure that it conforms to specified acceptable criteria. So you need to have a policy in your lab that talks about equipment acceptance procedures like validation. Equipment used for measurement shall be capable of achieving either the measurement accuracy or measurement uncertainty, or both is required to provide what? A valid result. This includes equipment used in the lab, equipment on loan, equipment used in point of care centers, in association with mobile facilities authorized by the lab. The verification of the equipment acceptance testing can be, where relevant, based on what calibration certificate and return equipment. So let's say, for example, for like PET, for you to accept it, you could look at the calibration certificate and etc. But for analyzers, you must do what we call equipment verification. Verification of equipment. So verification, even the LIS, you have to verify them, or what you properly known as validation. So there must be an objective evidence that checks what the characteristic, the performance of that equipment before the equipment is used to run the patient sample. So you cannot just buy an analyzer and run one level of QC or two level of QC and start using it to run a patient sample. It is not done. That equipment must be validated. It is crime for you to use any equipment that are not been verified or validated to run the patient or sample, no matter the urgency of it. Okay, can you hear me loud and clear? Please, if you can hear me, type on the comment section you can hear me. So, equipment, instrument, instruction for you. There's what we call the equipment instruction for you, the manuals. Prevent unintended adjustment of equipment. Helps to operate. It should be operated by trained and authorized and competent personnel. So if you don't want to be trained, then for that equipment, you shouldn't be allowed to use the equipment. Whether you're a director, whether you are an entry-level staff, everyone must be trained and deemed competent before such a person use the equipment. Instruction for the use of equipment shall be readily available. The equipment shall be used as specified by the manufacturer unless validated by the lab. So whatever the manufacturer have said about that equipment, you are expected to follow it out. If they say change the reagent every every week, you have to do that. You can only deviate when you, the lab, has validated a new way of doing something. Okay, I can remember one time we're using one of the equipment, don't want to mention him, and those equipment, every 7 days, the creatinine, I think the creatinine onboard stability is expired, and you have to throw it away. And sometimes we don't even use up to that numbers of test kits that is in that region. So what we did was we did a validation, and we see that, oh, this thing can still be sustained for 14 days. And it was well documented and passed. So when an auditor comes, say, oh, why is your reagent not change every 7 days? Because that's the onboard stability and call you are running. We say, okay, this is what we did. We validated it that this equipment, the reagent can still work for the next 14 days, unlike the 7 days onboard expiration date. Please note that if it is manufacturer expiration date, that reagent should not be used. We'll come to that. So, can somebody read this? Somebody read 6.4.5.
Equipment maintenance and repair shall have preventive maintenance programs based on manufacturer's instructions. Deviation from the manufacturer's schedule or instruction shall be recorded. Equipment shall be maintained in a safe working condition and working order. Equipment that is defective or outside specified requirements shall be taken out of service and clearly labeled. Laboratory shall decontaminate equipment before service, repair, or decommissioning. Provide suitable space for repairs and provide appropriate personal protective equipment.
Okay. So it is expected that you have a schedule, your maintenance program. This is part of the equipment management. So your periodic maintenance, your daily maintenance, monthly maintenance, weekly maintenance must be done. Part of the training for the when you are trying to install the equipment, it's not just to learn how to operate it, you must also learn the maintenance. Whether you are a male, whether you are a female, irrespective, learn the maintenance is core aspect. So all your daily maintenance should be done daily and not be carried over to the weekend. Because if you don't maintain this equipment, the lifespan of the equipment will be decreasing. Some part of this, especially some part of this, where we have a very poor maintenance culture. So you have to maintain. So there must be a schedule for your periodic maintenance, for your preventive maintenance. And if possible, for there are some of these preventive maintenance that you will need to order the parts, maybe from outside the country, from Europe and etc. So you must create avenues for that. There are some equipment, once they have done some numbers of tests, they have to undergo two what to undergo some maintenance. So all these things has to be, and there must be proof, documented procedures of your daily maintenance, your weekly maintenance, monthly maintenance, and your preventive maintenance. Equipment that is defective or outside specified requirement to be taken out of service and clearly labeled out of service or not to use. So once the equipment is not functioning, take it out from the workspace, or if you have to keep it somewhere close, you must clearly label it as what? Out of service or not in use. If you don't label it, it's a non-conformance. Laboratory shall decontaminate equipment before servicing, repair, and decommissioning. So before you repair any equipment, before the equipment is repaired, the engineer or yourself, you have to decontaminate it. Then when you want to decommission equipment, you have to decontaminate it. And there must be a proof, evidence of your decontamination. The agent you are using to decontaminate it should be stated there. And the proof, the record that shows what that decontamination was done has to be there. This is very, very crucial to what equipment management. We have equipment adverse incident report. So this adverse incident report, an accident can be attributed directly to specific equipment shall be investigated, and you have to document it. Where there are adverse incidents about the equipment, you have to document it, communicate what to the manufacturers or supplier or both appropriate authorities as required. The laboratory shall have procedures, please take note, for responding to any manufacturer's record or other notice and take action recommended by what the manufacturer. Okay, now 6.4.7 talks about the equipment record. So what should be contained in an equipment record? The manufacturer and the supplier details have to be there for each equipment. So it is expected that you open a file or a folder for each equipment. Sufficient information and unique identify each item of the equipment, including the software and the firmware, if applicable. Date at which the equipment was received, acceptance testing, and entry into the service. Evidence that the equipment conforms to the specified acceptable criteria. The current location has to be there. The condition when it was received, whether it's a new, used, or renovated equipment, you have to document it. Next, the manufacturer instruction. That packaging style, that manufacturer instruction, you must ensure that is there. The program for preventive maintenance, those records has to be there. Any maintenance activities performed by the lab or approved external service provider, damage to function, modification, or repair of the equipment has to be what documented. The status of the equipment, if it's obsolete, everything has to be there. So these are records. Other records also include having your incident report for that equipment. So, or your error log. All these are part of equipment management. So when you have all this, it helps you to manage what the equipment. So these are very, very important. For each equipment in your facility, you should be able to have all these records. Next, we'll talk about equipment calibration and metrological traceability. The laboratory shall specify calibration and traceability requirements that are sufficient to maintain consistent reporting of examination results. So you must have a policy that talks about calibration and traceability. So for quantitative method or measured analyte, when we're talking about quantitative method now, you know what we're talking about, not qualitative. Any method that gives an actual value. Specification shall include calibration and metrological traceability requirements. The qualitative method and quantitative method that measure characteristics rather than that discrete analysis shall specify the characteristics being assessed and such required necessary for reproducibility over a period of time. So what we are saying here is that for every of your quantitative testing in the equipment, you should have what your methodological traceability and calibrations for it. So it has to be calibrated and up to date. Because when an equipment is not calibrated, then it's the quality of the results is highly questionable. So these are also part of the calibration and validations of what equipment. Talked about calibration. Condition of use and the manufacturer instruction of calibration has to be followed. Record the methodological traceability, verify the equipment, the accuracy, and the functionality of it. We call it function check. Record the calibration status and the date of which you are going to recalibrate it. Ensure that where the correction factors are used, these are updated and recorded when recalibration will occur. Okay, for methodological traceability of measurement of results. So the lab shall establish and maintain methodological traceability of its measurement result by means of documenting unbroken chain of calibrators, calibrations, and contributing to the measurement uncertainty. That's what we call the MU. So MU, you have to calculate your MU, the measurement uncertainty of that analyte. So let's say, for example, sodium, potassium, what is the measurement uncertainty? Link them up to appropriate references. So you have to do that. That is majorly for quantitative testing. Now, the laboratory shall ensure that measurement results are traceable to the highest possible level of traceability and the international standard unit, which is called the ISU. So you need to have those things in place within the lab. Calibration provided by a competent laboratory or a certified personnel to do the calibration. There are some calibration that are within your jurisdictions. You can be your expertise, let's say calibration of an analytical equipment, you can. But there are some equipment that you don't have the capacity to work on calibration. Let's say things like some people may not have the capacity on working on timers, pipettes, all those small equipment calibration or about safety cabinet. So two things you can do: you can take the equipment to the calibration lab. There's what we call calibration lab. Like in Nigeria, we have a calibration and methodological traceability lab. You can do that. If you can't do that, you could call for experts, people who have license on that. They could help you to do those calibrations and document it. And they also have to show a proof that those things have been done and they pass calibration. Am I communicating? Yes. So for qualitative testing, what we do method traceability. I may be demonstrated by testing no material or previous sample sufficient to consistently identify and when applicable the intensity of reaction. So here we do traceability, measurement traceability. For genetic examination, traceability for genetic reference is established. So you can establish it to the reference to the reference strain. Let's say, for example, in microbiology, would establish it to a particular known values or known results that could use to establish. But what we are saying that both the measurement uncertainty has to be calculated for every quantitative, and measurement traceability has to be done for the what qualitative. Okay, 6.6 talks about reagent and consumables. Reagent and consumables. You know, you can't have a equipment and without having reagent and consumables. That reagent and consumables, the equipment becomes what? Idle or non-functioning. So the laboratory shall have process for selection, procurement, reception, storage, acceptance testing, and inventory management for reagent work and consumable. This you can see under supply chain, logistics and supply chain within the lab. It's also part of the equipment in the basic ISO1, the basic quality management system. It's also part of purchasing and inventory in the 12 quality system essentials. So the lab should have a process. First, you should have a policy on it, have a process, SOPs for selection, SOPs for procurement, SOPs for reception, SOPs for storage, SOP for accepting testing, and inventory management of reagent and consuming, or you could have it as a form of what? A manual, depending on what on what is acceptable by you. Are we communicating? Okay, so that is it. So there must be a process for selection, procurement, reception, storage, and all these processes must have what? The policy, the process, which is the SOP, and the record. So record shows you the proof. So we need to have proof that, oh, every reagent that comes in, where they are received, your inventory management, your acceptance testing. Let's say, for example, a reagent comes in ref item, refrigerated item. How do you show that that reagent actually came in the right temperature? So you have to test. You have to use a thermometer to test the temperature at which and document it. Because sometimes when those things and does not come within the right temperature, this can cause QC to be failing, can cause a lot of wastage within the system. So for this not to happen, the laboratory shall have a process for selection, procurement, reception, storage, acceptance testing, and inventory management of what your reagent and what consumable. So for the reagent and consumable,
I can't hear you again. Is anybody still here?
I think he was locked out or something.